Okay, so someone sent us this document, right, called the Intrinsic Design Manifesto, and it's got us thinking.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
It is. I mean, it's not about like, quick fixes or motivational posters. This manifesto, it kind of lays out this whole argument for like a pretty big shift in how we think about performance. Like it's
Okay.
all about what drives us from the inside out. Not just relying on those external rewards all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what struck me right away, and I'm guessing you too, is just how bold the manifesto is. You
Mm.
know, it's basically saying we've kind of messed up when it comes to motivation.
Yeah.
It's saying that all those bonuses and those perks, they don't really get to the heart of real performance.
Right.
What they argue is that high performance, it comes from the environment itself. So it's really a shift from trying to manage individual motivation to designing systems where that motivation it just kind of thrives naturally.
Yeah, and they don't hold back either. Like they call it, I've got it right here. They call this manifesto a declaration of war against the old operating model of motivation.
Wow. Strong words.
Right. So their main point, and it's a good one, it's that constantly like throwing perks and gamified stuff at performance issues. It's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. You're not really fixing the problem.
Yeah.
You're just dealing with the symptoms. The real solution, according to them, is to change the underlying design of our systems.
And that's where they introduce these three, I guess, pillars, you could call them, the foundation of what they call intrinsic performance design. And these are like the key ingredients for creating those environments where people are just, naturally driven to do their best work.
Okay, so let's dive into this, right? Let's start with something that I'm sure we've all experienced, and that's that endless stream of workplace perks. Right from the get-go, the manifesto talks about how companies love to throw perks at performance problems.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it, like bonus schemes, those wellness apps. Everyone's always pushing, even like ping pong tables and stuff. It's all part of this idea that we can solve complex problems with these little sweeteners.
It does seem that way sometimes, doesn't it?
It does.
Like we're trying to distract ourselves from the real issues.
Right. In the manifesto, it takes aim at this approach. It says that these perks are often just compensation for environments that don't work.
Mm.
And get this, they even go so far as to call it, and I'm quoting here directly, bribery dressed up as culture.
Wow.
Right. It really makes you think about why these perks are even seen as necessary in the first place.
It does. Well,
Yeah. And the central argument here is really simple. It's perks don't build performance.
mm-hmm.
Systems do.
Right.
If you're constantly having to dangle a reward in front of someone
Yeah.
to get them to do their job, the problem's probably not with them. The problem's with the system itself.
Yeah.
Okay?
It could
Yeah.
be so many things. Maybe people aren't challenged enough, or maybe they're micromanaged. Maybe they just don't see, the point of their work.
Exactly. And the manifesto talks about this idea of motivation becoming self-sustaining.
Hmm.
So like by giving people autonomy over their work, letting them really own it. And then also, giving them challenges that are actually engaging and making sure they can see that they're making progress
Mm-hmm.
and connecting their work to a bigger purpose.
Mm-hmm.
If you do all that, then you can create an environment where motivation isn't something that you have to constantly force or manufacture. It grows naturally.
It makes you think about the way we've traditionally approached motivation, right?
It does.
Like all those old theories and models.
Yeah.
And the manifesto actually talks about B.F. Skinner.
Oh, right. Yeah. Behaviorism.
Yeah, behaviorism and how much influence he's had. And they acknowledge that, he really did change the way we think about how environments shape our behavior. All that stuff about reinforcement and punishment. It's been hugely influential.
Yeah.
And it's given us a framework for thinking about learning and habits.
But here's where it gets really interesting, right? So our understanding of human motivation has come a long way since
Yeah.
Skinner,
Yeah.
But the corporate world, according to this manifesto, it's kind of stuck in the past.
Hmm.
Like we're still using this old stimulus response model, like it's the 1950s or something.
It's like we haven't updated our software.
Yeah, exactly. And they give some really clear examples of how this ghost of behaviorism, as they call it, is still hanging around. So think about those gamification systems. The ones where you get points for doing stuff and you get badges and all that.
Oh yeah.
Or performance reviews that are totally tied to bonuses. And even those perks that are supposed to motivate us.
Right.
But really they're just superficial.
So what they're saying is that these things, they don't really lead to genuine engagement.
Right.
They just lead to compliance. People do what they have to do to get the reward or avoid the punishment.
Exactly. It's all about external motivation.
Yeah, and they talk about how this leads to short-term compliance, but ultimately long-term disengagement. And this idea of brittle performance that's extrinsically chained, it's really powerful.
It is.
Because it suggests that as soon as you take away those external motivators, the motivation it disappears.
Like it was never really there in the first place.
Exactly.
Okay, so the manifesto is basically saying that we need to completely rethink how we approach this whole thing, right?
Yeah, it's a call for a fundamental shift.
It is. So instead of trying to hack behavior, as they put it, through these external incentives, we should be designing environments that actually invite challenge, that reward progress, and that make growth self-reinforcing.
It's about creating a system where people are naturally drawn to improve and develop.
Yeah, and where their motivation comes from a sense of meaning and purpose, not from some external reward.
Right. So this brings us to another key point, which is the shift from relying on external incentives to fostering internal desire. They say that a lot of organizations, they're essentially trying to extract performance from their people.
It's almost like they're trying to squeeze it out of them,
Yeah, like it's some kind of resource that you can just mine.
Right. And the manifesto is very clear on this point. They say, and again, I'm quoting directly here, you can't bribe people into greatness. You might be able to get them to do certain things in the short term, but you can't force them to really believe in their work or to feel a sense of ownership over what they're doing or to be resilient in the face of challenges.
Right.
Those things, they have to come from within. They have to be cultivated. They can't be imposed.
So then the question becomes, how do we do that? How do we cultivate those qualities?
Yeah, and that's where this whole concept of intrinsic performance design comes in. They talk about building environments where people want to improve, where that internal drive, it isn't something that has to be manufactured from the outside. It's built into the system.
It's like baking it into the cake, Yeah.
Exactly. And it's important to understand this isn't just about, making people feel good or creating some kind of fluffy work environment.
Right.
This is about a system level strategy.
It's about fundamentally redesigning the way we think about and approach work.
Yeah, and if you think about those high performing teams, the ones we all admire, the ones that are really killing it, they're not driven by free pizza and foosball tables. They're driven by a shared sense of progress.
Yeah,
they want to be the best at what they do, and they're working in a system that challenges them in ways that are actually meaningful,
right,
and that rewards them with a sense of accomplishment and purpose.
Which brings us back to that core idea that we don't motivate people. We design environments where motivation becomes inevitable.
And that's really the heart of this whole manifesto.
It is.
Okay, so this all sounds, great in theory, but I'm sure you're wondering, like how does this actually work in practice?
Yeah, how do you actually do this?
Right. So the manifesto gets into the mechanics of intrinsic performance design. It lays out three main components.
Okay, so the nuts and bolts of it?
Yeah, the nuts and bolts. And these are the practical things that organizations can actually focus on. So the first one is the behavioral environment audit. So this is all about getting a really clear picture of two things. First, what are the specific behaviors that are absolutely essential for high performance, right? Like what do people actually need to be doing? And second, what does your current system actually reward and punish?
So you're looking at the alignment between the behaviors you need and the behaviors your system is actually encouraging.
Right.
And I think what's important here is that they emphasize that you need to base this audit on actual evidence, not just on your assumptions.
Yeah, like you need to really look at the data, see what's actually happening, not just what you think is happening.
Right.
And the goal of this audit is to uncover what they call performance debt, which is basically the gap between the performance you need and what your current system is actually producing, and also to identify those motivational gaps that companies often try to fill with those superficial perks we were talking about before.
It's about addressing the root causes, not just the symptom.
Exactly. Okay, so the second component is what they call the intrinsic performance journey.
Okay, so it's trademarked. That's interesting.
It is. So clearly they have a specific framework in mind.
Right. So what is this journey?
So they describe it as like a mastery path,
right,
that people progress along as they gain experience within a system.
Mm.
And this could apply to all sorts of things, right?
Mm.
Like a new employee's onboarding process, or a customer's experience with a product, or even someone who's moving into a leadership role.
Mm-hmm.
The key is that it's a designed experience that guides people toward deeper levels of capability over time.
It's like a structured path for development and growth.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this journey, it's not just a straight line,
Right.
It's not just, step 1, step 2, step 3. They talk about incorporating embedded challenges and even friction that drives focus.
Yeah.
Along with, visible progress markers.
It's about creating a sense of challenge and accomplishment.
Yeah. And for me, that's what distinguishes it from like typical gamification.
Right.
It's not just about, earning points or unlocking levels. It's about really structuring the experience in a way that encourages growth. And it's about giving people feedback so they can see their progress and feel that sense of mastery.
So it's more about growth architecture than just gamification.
Exactly. Okay, and then the third component is challenge architecture plus embedded rituals. So this sounds like it gets into the day-to-day details of how the system works.
Yeah, so like how do you actually design the experience to be motivating?
Yeah. So they talk about building in the right kind of tension. So things like structure challenges that are tough but achievable. Regular feedback that helps people learn and improve, and opportunities for autonomy and ownership.
So it's about finding that sweet spot.
Yeah, that sweet spot.
Where people are challenged but not overwhelmed.
Yeah, exactly. And they also talk about building in moments for renewal and reflection, like time to just step back and think about things.
It's about creating a rhythm, right?
Yeah.
A rhythm of work and rest, of challenge and recovery. And the key is that these elements, when you apply them across all your systems, whether they're for employees or for customers, they turn every interaction into an opportunity to engage and grow.
Yeah, so the idea is that these three components, they all work together to create a system where people are basically driven to grow and develop.
Yeah. Because
the system itself is designed that way.
It's about creating a virtuous cycle.
Yeah, where people are challenged, they make progress, they feel motivated, and that just keeps feeding back into itself.
Right, and the more they progress, the more motivated they become, and the more they want to grow and develop, and that leads to higher performance.
Exactly. Okay, so to illustrate this, the manifesto, it gives some really interesting before and after scenarios, like showing how things could change if we shifted towards this intrinsic performance design approach.
Okay, so let's look at some of those.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
So the first one is from transactional training to developmental ecosystems. So the before picture, it's something that I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with, like those traditional training programs that are all about delivering content, But they don't really do much to make sure that people actually retain that knowledge or use it in practice.
Right.
And the after picture with these developmental ecosystems, it's totally different.
Okay, so what does that look like?
So learning becomes this ongoing process that's integrated into everything.
Yeah.
And there are embedded challenges that give people a chance to practice and get feedback. And there are clear pathways for people to develop their skills over time.
So it's not just about acquiring knowledge, it's about actually developing skills and capabilities.
Exactly. Okay, and then another transformation they talk about is from gamification gimmicks to growth architecture, which we touched on a bit earlier, but the big difference here is between those superficial attempts to boost engagement, with points and badges and all that, versus a much more fundamental redesign of your core performance systems, right? So that they're built around intrinsic feedback loops and real-time challenges that actually fuel motivation.
So it's a much deeper change.
Yeah. It's not just about adding some game-like elements on top of a system that's not really working. It's about actually redesigning the system itself.
Yeah.
So it's built for growth.
It's like building a house from the ground up instead of just trying to, redecorate an old one.
Exactly. Okay, and they also talk about this shift from performance management to performance culture. So the before picture is probably pretty familiar to a lot of people. Those annual reviews that are all about checking boxes, and those reactive approaches to development where you only focus on people's weaknesses.
Right. So the after picture is about creating a culture of performance.
Yeah, it's about creating an environment where people feel a sense of ownership over their work, where they're driven to be the best at what they do,
Right.
and where they have the autonomy to actually do their work the way they think is best.
So it's not just about managing performance; it's about fostering it.
Yeah, and the manifesto also talks about how this applies to the customer experience. So they talk about moving from customer retention tactics to behaviorally aligned journeys.
Interesting.
So the before picture is all about those standard email marketing campaigns and those generic nudges that try to get people to buy more stuff. But the after picture is about designing customer experiences that are actually aligned with people's natural motivations.
So it's about understanding what drives customer behavior.
Yeah, and creating experiences that tap into those motivations.
Yeah.
So that people are not just, buying stuff because they're being manipulated into it, but because they actually see the value in it.
It's about creating a win-win.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, and the manifesto makes some pretty bold claims about the results you can get from these kinds of transformations. So they talk about increased resilience, measurable growth in capabilities, a stronger culture, and even higher profits, all without burning people out.
That's a pretty compelling combination.
It is, yeah. and at this point, they ask this really fundamental question: is your system designed to extract effort or to develop people?
That's a good question to ask yourself.
It is. It really makes you think about what your priorities are.
It does.
Okay, and then finally, the manifesto talks about the importance of adopting a new language for performance. So they're saying that the words we use to talk about performance actually shape how we think about it and how we approach it.
Yeah, language is powerful.
It is.
It shapes our reality.
Yeah, and they say that for too long the language of performance has been all about control. Words like engagement scores and incentive alignment and behavioral compliance. And they argue that this kind of language, it reduces people to just outputs, like they're just cogs in a machine.
Right. And it makes performance seem like something that you can just, force or manipulate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what's the new language then? What are the words that we should be using?
Yeah. How do we talk about performance in a way that's more human-centered?
So they introduce a bunch of new terms. First, there's the intrinsic performance journey, which is basically what we were talking about before. It's that designed experience with increasingly meaningful challenges that helps people develop their autonomy and their mastery and their sense of identity.
Right.
And then there's challenge architecture, which is the way you structure those challenges and the feedback mechanisms and the opportunities for flow within a system, so that growth is not just possible, it's practically inevitable.
It's about making growth the default setting.
Yeah. And then they also have the behavioral solution matrix, which is a tool that helps you to diagnose those points where motivation is breaking down in a system and to figure out what behavioral shifts are needed to fix it. And then there's motivation debt, which is basically the hidden costs of relying on those external rewards, the things like dependency and a lack of intrinsic motivation.
Right.
And they also talk about performance perks, which are those superficial rewards that often mask the fact that there's no real developmental structure in place.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a deeper wound.
Yeah. and finally they refer to Skinnerian systems as those systems that are still stuck in that old model of stimulus and response and external control. And they're pretty clear that these kinds of systems are outdated and potentially harmful.
It's a pretty strong indictment
It is.
of the way we've traditionally thought about and approached performance.
Okay, so to sum it all up, the message of this manifesto is really simple. High performance. You can't just buy it with perks or force it with incentives.
Right.
You have to design it. You have to create the right environment for it.
And what this manifesto gives you is not just a critique of those old approaches, but a new framework, a new way of thinking about it,
Yeah.
a new language even.
Yeah, a new language.
It's a much more human-centered approach to performance.
It is, and it makes you think about the environments that you have the power to influence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like what kind of systems are you creating, and what kind of impact are those systems having on the people around you?
Yeah, the manifesto ends with this really powerful question, which is, how deeply will you choose to let design shape the environments and the outcomes you influence?
It's a good question. It's a good question to ask yourself.
It is. It's a call to action, really. Yeah.
It is. It's a call to really think about what you're doing and how you're doing it, and to make sure that your systems are designed to help people grow and develop, not just to extract effort from them.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that there's a real shift happening right now in how we think about performance and motivation. And this manifesto, it's a part of that shift.
It is.
And the question is, where do you stand?
Where do you stand?